podcast. We have a great guest today. And before we do that, I want to remind everybody, please go check us out on the blog. That's www.ffipodcast.com. You can subscribe, get all kinds of follow-ups on not only the articles that we write about specific areas in fly fishing, whether it's gear, technique, tactical topics, et cetera, but you can also get hooked into our listening for trips, whether they're hosted or individual trips. But what I really always try to do on those trips is coordinate with the owner or host or application area and really bring in you guys some good deals. So we often have deals off of those that aren't available anywhere else. I try to bring together good people, especially for hosted trips, etc., where we're all super fishy and trying to get out there and have a blast. So please join in, subscribe to the podcast and or the list, and keep a follow on us. Appreciate that. On today's show, we've got Angus Line on the phone here. And Angus, you're from Western Australia, well, a little bit south of Western, which is Perth area. And the Perth area is really unique, as you described to me, in that you have the ability to travel in so many locations and really target so many different species. So we're going to talk about that a bit. And then after we get through some of that, which we won't be able to cover all of it, there's so much, we're going to go through and we're going to talk about how to select gear and how to talk to a shop owner about gear when you're looking for it. That's an important area. And then we're going to follow up with a little tip about travel, because Angus does travel all over the place in not only Australia, but to Indonesia, et cetera. It's a really great location for that kind of thing. So Angus, you've been fishing for, gosh, you had told me about 3 years as a fly fishing angler, but fishing as a kid. And boy, you were only like 6 months into it, and you started your outfitter, which is the flyfishingoutfitter.com.au. If you want to check that out, that's flyfishingoutfitter.com.au. And if you go to fly fishing outfitter, let me make sure I get the name right for your Instagram. It is fly_fishing_outfitter. You guys can check him out there, or his personal page. And I highly recommend his personal page. Is one of my favorites out there. It's called Angus, ANGUS _line, just like the straight line, LINE. But Angus, you've got some phenomenal pictures. In fact, we're going to tell a story about some amazing rainbow trout you caught just recently that I'd love to everyone to hear. So, Angus, welcome to the show. It's great to have you from overseas here, and tell us a little bit about the Perth area in Australia, man.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for having me, mate. Greatly appreciated. So basically I'm from Perth. It's the capital of Western Australia. We're in the lower half of the state. Where we're kind of situated is in this perfect, I guess, equilibrium of our south coast fishing and our north coast fishing. So we have access from here to a lot of different species, and the diversity of species that we have here in Western Australia is quite amazing. So we can go up from north of Perth, and then we can experience some world-class flats fishing. We catch everything from permit to blue bastards to what we call tuskfish, parrotfish. It's kind of endless. And then we go into the south coast, we get yellowtail kings and amberjacks and all other species that we find on the south coast, including we have trout fishery here as well. The stocked trout, traditionally, some places they do reproduce, some they stock annually. The trout, I wouldn't say is world class, but they are here.
Yeah. You mentioned a blue bastard. Is that a standard bluefish? Is that what you're referring to?
No. So what you would refer to as a bluefish, we refer to as a tailor.
Okay.
So a blue bastard is a species of morwong, essentially, and they're not a pelagic predatory fish. They are on the bottom. They're feeding on crabs and crustaceans and worms and things like that. They're widely renowned as a high-end fly fishing target here. So we get them all through the northern part, from sort of the Midwest all the way through North Australia, the Northern Territory, over to the other side on the northern East Coast.
Very cool. So with regard to Perth, you had mentioned there's quite a bit of travel available to you, but right in Perth,
Mhm.
there's not a ton of different species. You were saying it's primarily carp fishing that you like to focus on in that area.
Myself, yeah, when I'm around the metro, I'm fishing carp most of the time. It's just something I love doing. They're an awesome fish. We have a lot of lakes as well that have koi carp too. So we're getting bright
Mm,
coloured fish, large fish. There is good species here. We have black brim, mulloway. Mulloway are essentially like I don't know if you've seen a cob from South Africa, same
hmm.
sort of thing. We have offshore pelagics as well. So we have Spanish mackerel, yellowtail kingfish, that sort of
Okay.
stuff as well. But primarily when I'm around the metro, my main target is carp. That's my
Yeah.
interest here.
When you're fishing carp, what's your setup for that in and around there? Because I've seen some pretty big carp in your photos on
Yeah,
a regular basis.
yeah, we do get some large carp here. So definitely not the same sort of caliber as things that you see over in like Canary Islands, Spain. But we do definitely get some big carp. So I'm mainly fishing a 7 weight setup. I'm fishing a Scott Centric in a 7, and then it has a Lamson M8 reel on
Mm,
it. So large arbor, they can turn and run at you sometimes, and you just want to be able to rack that line up really quick.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
if I'm fishing them a little bit more finesse, I might step down to a 6 weight. So I'll be fishing on like a 6 weight G Loomis rod. Heaps of finesse. They're a tricky fish. They're very spooky. You need to get the
Yeah.
fly presented in a perfect spot for them to eat. So um, you're looking for maximum presentation, but when you're fishing them in snaggy water, you also want something that can stop them too.
Yeah. When you're fishing them, are you typically fishing like a lead eye or something like that, or are you using more like a bead eye scenario, something a little lighter, um, so you can do that nice kind of drag the drop scenario in targeting them?
Yeah, I mean, drag and drop really is it's such a fantastic method to chasing carp because they have that monocular vision where they're only seeing the fly sort of 6 to 10 inches from their nose. So if you land that fly right there, 9 out of 10 times you're going to spook that fish, or more often than not. So a lot of the time we will drag and drop on an angle to get it in front of them, not spook them. So we're trying to stay as subtle as possible. We don't want anything that sinks too fast, but we also need
Hmm.
something that gets into their zone, their feeding zone, fast enough too. So when I tie, I generally tie in a mixture of weights, and then I just judge the area that I'm fishing at the time. But I would say primarily I'm fishing bead chain.
Okay, yeah. And that bead chain gives you enough, and then I'm assuming you keep the fly relatively thin just because of, not trying to interrupt the water and also allowing it to sink fast enough with that lighter weight.
Yeah, sparse, most of the time. Here I'm trying to imitate mainly in our water dragonfly larvae, worms, or we have a species of crawfish called a yabby. They're essentially a crawdad, is I'm assuming is what you call them over there.
Yeah, yeah, crawdads, crawfish,
Yeah,
mud bugs.
yeah, yeah,
Get all
yeah,
kinds of names for them. Right, right. Cool.
yeah. Cool.
Um, so, how did you get into the carp fishing? Was that just a natural kind of progression for you when you start fly fishing, or did you start there? Where did you start in the fly fishing? I guess.
Um, I've been carp fishing for since I was a child. I've been carp fishing for a long time. It was something I always did on spin before fly.
Mm-hmm.
We have them through all of our metro lakes, or the bigger part of our metro lakes. So they're easy access to them. There's a lot of fish here to go and chase, and some really really cool systems and flat systems too that you can find them on. So I've chased them for a very long time, but I really got into the fly fishing targeting trout. I was fishing the main scenario that got me into. I was fishing this real twig water system, chasing trout, and I couldn't find anything on spin that was finesse enough. So I went and actually bought it was a sage rod. It was older model. I think off the top of my head, it was a TLXF maybe, and it was a
Oh, yeah,
zero
yeah.
zero weight. Yeah,
Okay.
a double zero, and we had a 1 weight line on it, and I was just roll casting tiny little dry flies up this twig water, catching like 4 or 5 inch trout.
That's cool. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a pretty fun little scenario in itself. I mean, we have tons of blue lining around here in the States, and I mean, it's got a passion of its own. It's really cool. You go out into, especially like Western United States, into these super small streams that like you said, you're catching these tiny little brook trout like this, and
Yeah, yeah,
but it's primarily dry flies, and a lot of it can be sight fishing, and yeah, it's really cool. Really cool. So
yeah.
you got started there, but I mean, obviously, in and around you, there's a ton of things to fish. So let's talk about. Why don't we just kind of head north? If you could, maybe do a couple spots north of you. You said I know you go as far as like driving 25 hours for things.
Yeah.
So, give me some ideas of what's up north and what's available to you there, and then we'll head south after that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Western Australia is a massive state, and we don't have many people here. In the whole of Western Australia, there's about 2 million residents. So, obviously, I mean, we're driving 110 kilometers an hour. So, do the maths, it's 65 odd miles an hour at a time, and it's taking us to get into the top of half of, right up into the Kimberley, the top of the Western Australia. I mean, I'm doing 25, 30 hours to get into some of those fishing areas in car. So you can imagine how big this is and the little amount of people that we have here. It creates this fantastic situation where our flats here don't get a lot of pressure, like somewhere like the Keys or like anywhere like that. So we have essentially our flats, I guess, really start, you're driving 6-7 hours north of Perth to get into some good flat systems.
Okay.
Once you get up through to Shark Bay, it starts to get really good. So Shark Bay, that area, we have a ton of different species there, big diversity. So we have like giant trevally bluefish, or what we call tailor, ladyfish, giant herring. We call those. We have pink snapper and a multitude of other species there that are really class fly fishing targets. So it's a fantastic area. I spend a lot of time there because it's accessible for me. It's not too long of a drive, so I can sort of go there in a weekend and create a good trip out of it, still with limited time. Obviously, having the shop, I have to sort of play around that and
stay low
figure out.
engaged, etc.
Yeah, that's it. I can't run away too much. But yeah, I have a car that I've set up. It's a Land Cruiser troop carrier, so I've set it up so I can sleep in the back, and it allows me to sort of do these shotgun trips, go and fish a flat for a day or two, and head back to the shop.
Yeah.
And
are the roads good? I mean, are you taking the one up? Is that what you primarily take and go from there? Because
so
when we view Australia as a statesman, right? It always looks like dirt roads in the middle of nowhere, right? And I think that's not necessarily true all the time, right?
it is and it isn't. So
Yeah.
a lot of that stuff that I'm talking about through Shark Bay, I'll do. I mean, it's probably 7 or 8 hours on bitumen, and then it's another 3 hours on a dirt track. So
Okay.
a lot of the stuff, a lot of this remote stuff to get into these really good areas is dirt roads in the middle of nowhere. That's what it is.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool.
Yep.
And are you running trips out of the shop for that kind of stuff too, or do you work with some other guide services, etc.?
Yeah, we are starting to a lot more. So the stuff in Western Australia is a little bit harder logistically, and you would think it would be really easy being right here in our backyard, but the situation is that it is very remote, and we're doing big trips off road in very gnarly country. And then you're also doing a lot of the time big kilometers on foot to get into some of these areas. 2 weekends ago, I did a trip for bluefish, and I think I fished a Saturday and a Sunday, and the first day I did 26 kilometers on foot just to get into the spot and back out, plus some wading and that. So it was just a situation where I couldn't drive in any further, and I needed to get on foot to go and find the bait to find the fish. So it's rugged.
Yeah, that's 16 miles of hiking, right? Relatively.
Yeah, it would be.
Yeah. That's quite a bit. So is that is that a in and out, or is that one way direction?
That was in and out.
Okay. Yeah. So that's
Plus
a
some
healthy.
wading.
Yeah, and you're doing that for a day.
In one day, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Cool. So it's quite a commitment then. All right.
Yeah, that's the thing here. It is remote, and you don't have the access via roads to a lot of these places. So you do sort of need to get out and travel or fish it on a boat. You've really got to do the case to get good fish. In saying that, though, there is a lot of places where I could probably just pull up and get just as good fish, but to get into some of those really special places, I like to travel a bit too. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, we
And
do have
have
hosted
that
trips,
imaginary element of like there could be some monster out there that I'm going to pick up.
100%.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's like the new area, the what am I going to run into? Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. And doing Ks and doing big trips, you do end up finding that stuff. My partner actually, when did we do it? Before Christmas, we went up and did another Midwest trip, chasing Taylor or bluefish, and she managed to get one that was just over the meter mark. So that was incredible. It's something that we just don't get here.
Yeah, yeah. So I interrupted a little bit. I got us off track. I took us down a rabbit hole. But you were talking about heading north. So you're about halfway up now, and you just keep kind of clipping along. Are there other specific areas that you like to hit along that way, or there's freshwater areas as well?
There is fresh water, but the fresh water doesn't really start again until you get further up, uh, more towards the Kimberley, which is right up the top of Western Australia. So after Shark Bay, the next sort of major area after that would be Ningaloo or Exmouth. So those areas we get like bonefish, permit, very popular there. It's an amazing permit fishery. Then we get all the other pelagic species as well, and a lot of other flat species. So we get a fish that we call a tuskfish. It's a very prized fly fish target here. So they're these luminescent blue. They kind of look a bit like a wrasse, but they have these really gnarly teeth, and
Okay.
they're very tricky. And they're referred to commonly here as a blue tractor because they'll grab your fly, they'll eat it, and before you can even react, they'll just get you straight into coral. They're almost impossible to stop.
Huh.
Really fun
So a
target.
lot like a trigger then in a sense, but it sounds like it's more powerful. Is that a fair
Yeah,
assessment?
very much like a trigger, but they would pull the trigger backwards.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, very cool. That's got
Yeah,
to be intense because I mean I've caught a handful of trigger and um, when you're into coral, it's hard to keep them on.
yeah,
Like you said, they want to dart, but to have something that's so much more powerful, it's just got to be ridiculous to catch. So what are some of the tactics that you're using to keep them out of the coral and keep them from breaking you off?
yeah. It's kind of one of those things with these species is you're really at the mercy of the fish. You're just kind of hoping that you hook it in a relatively safe area.
Hmm.
Uh, the traditional stuff, always your simple tactics for fighting any fish. Try and turn its head to get it off target, turn it the way you want it. Keep your rod tip low as well, maximum pressure on the fish. Try and burn it out quickly. But at the end of the day, they're a spooky fish, so you're fishing them on relatively light tippets, and they're
Yes.
extremely powerful.
So are you on like a 16 or 20 pound tippet? Is that what you're
Yeah,
fishing, or is
primarily
it even lighter?
16. Yeah,
Okay.
16, 20, 25. They are spooky. They do have a tendency to sort of sit there and look at your fly and then figure out something's not quite right and turn away. So you try and
Okay.
make everything, you're using as little flash as possible in your flies, light tippets, just trying to keep everything really natural and finesse.
And are you seeing them? Are you seeing them tail and things in like shallow
Yeah.
kind of whitewash coral areas, or are you fishing deeper coral, but they're so bright you can kind of see them and tart them that way?
Realistically, the thing that I mainly look for when I'm looking for a tusk fish is rubbly ground. So these fish are extremely, extremely intelligent fish. They've actually been known to even use tools as well, use rocks to open shellfish. But
Hmm.
the way that they use this rubble is they'll come up into a flat, this rubbly sort of flat, so softball sized rocks they love and smaller, and they'll come up and they'll actually grab them with their teeth and turn the rocks over to try and find crabs underneath the rocks, and then they can chase the crab around and obviously consume it. But they're actually flipping rocks a lot of
Oh
the time,
wow,
so they love these rubbly flats.
it's so cool, man. What
It's
an
really
adventure.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
heaps of personality, and they're luminescent blue when you see them in the water, so they really stand out. They're super visual, super, super cool, heaps of personality.
yeah, that is very cool. What about you've talked about a couple fish like that, a little bit smaller. Are there do you run into a lot of scenarios where there's other predaceous fish coming around trying to take them from you, etc., or is not as much of a problem?
Um, I wouldn't say other, more so sharks. We have a
Okay.
very healthy population of sharks here, so if you, yeah, I mean, there's definitely been situations where I've had a nice prize fish on like a tusk fish or something similar, and sharks have come up to try and consume the fish. again, it's one of those things where you kind of just got to be on the ball. A lot of the time, I just want to save the fish. I'm not, so much worried about getting it in at that stage. I'll back my drag off and just let it run. If it drops the
Yeah.
hook, it drops the hook. But yeah, try not to feed the sharks is the main
Okay.
objective.
Yeah. Yeah. And then let's go to the next area. I know you have some other things. I think you mentioned maybe some GTs in an area, et cetera. And go from there.
For sure, yeah. So all those areas, Shark Bay, Exmouth, Gulf, Ningaloo, they all have good GT fishing. And then you go up from there to the Pilbara. So we have like Karratha, Port Hedland. There's a few different areas through the Pilbara where you get, again, permit, tuskfish, blue bastards, all those similar species. We have a system called the Dampier Archipelago out of Karratha. So it's a series of islands. It's actually out of Dampier, right near Karratha. Karratha is the main town there. And it's a series of islands where there's extensive flat systems through. There's extensive channels as well. So you get those bigger pelagic and predatory fish that will come through and feed as the tidal movement is happening. So in those areas, you get amazing GT fishing, pelagic fishing, flats fishing. It's quite incredible. And you have mangrove systems in these areas, flat system. There's quite a lot going on. And again, there's not much pressure. So the fish numbers are fantastic.
Very cool. Let's talk a little bit about GTs and if you can kind of give us some information for that. A lot of people here in the States, we don't have the opportunity to go target GT very often, right?
Yeah, of course.
It's obviously a prize fish, extremely powerful, et cetera. But it sounds like you're doing more and more beach style fishing or kind of wave fishing, et cetera. And what are you really doing to target those areas? I've seen more and more, I think, conventional fishing where it's stick baits and you're just trying to make a motion
Yeah.
and boom, you get one. But in fly fishing, it seems like it's a little more sight and shoot scenario.
Yeah, definitely, and it depends. Like I just did a trip to West Papua, which is part of Indonesia, and I think in the week that I was there, it's one of those scenarios. You've got your 9 weight or your 8 weight in your hand, we're chasing triggers. You have your 12 weight in your backpack, but every time a GT rocks up, you've just got to take that quick shot with whatever you've got. So
Yeah.
I hooked 4 GTs for the week, and I landed 0. it's
Okay.
it's a hard one because the coral there is so amazing. It's so thick. The coral is very healthy. So trying to fight one of those fish, and even if you do hook it on the 12 weight, the chances of landing it are probably pretty minimal. But they're all opportunity casts that I took. I was focused on trigger fish, and that was
Yeah.
my opportunity when I was there to put some triggers on the board. So I took shots at GTs, lost them all.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. But really, when I'm looking for a good area to fish GTs, obviously they're predatory fish, so they're looking for bait is a big thing. So things like mullet, white bait, anything, bonefish, they love to eat bonefish. That sort of stuff is what they're going to hang around. And it really depends on also the situation of the flat that you're on too. So what the flat looks like. If you have channels running up onto the flat, that's always a good place to stake out too, especially as the water starts to run off. And
Yep.
all those bait fish are going to have to start moving off into the deeper water. Those GTs will use those channels as sort of highways to get to their next meal. So
And
there's
do the
likely areas to
GTs
stake.
do they sit in the slightly deeper water, like on the shelf, and kind of then run up and then move back into those deeper shells, or are they primarily
For
just
sure.
kind of cruising the flats? What's their
It's both.
typical habit? Okay.
Well, yeah, it's a bit of both because anatomically they're obviously a deeper fish in the body too. So you're going to have a little bit more water than what a bonefish can sort of, move through. So
Hmm.
generally when the water gets to the depth of their body, they will start moving into it. So places like surf lines, especially areas like what we have over here is Cocos Islands. So
Hmm.
Cocos Islands would kind of be like our Kiribati Christmas Island scenario that we have. Um, Surf line, a lot of the time you'll see them, they'll cruise a surf line and they'll be waiting until that water gets deep enough for them to be able to come up and predate on the flats. So really good areas to look for as well, where the water's sort of not high enough. But when it does get high enough, they'll come up under the flats, they'll come into the lagoons, and then that's where they'll do a lot of their feeding.
Hmm. Hmm. Very cool. Okay. You talked a little bit earlier about permit. I mean, as a fly fisherman, everybody looks at permit as this prized possession, this very difficult fish to catch. But, the more and more I talk to people that get around to a lot of species, they tend to go, you know what? Here's some other species to really consider in that ranking.
Yeah.
Do you have some ideas around that too?
For sure. I can't speak a lot on permit because it's not something I've really ever dedicated any time to. I've
Hmm.
had the odd shot here and there where I've been fishing for other things and they've popped up. Um, so yeah, I mean, I've got some friends that are super diehard permit fans. They spend like pretty much all their flats time on chasing them, and I can see why. There's a great appeal to them. They're hard fish to obviously catch. Um, but yeah, I mean, if I was gonna put my sort of finger on the hardest species that I've come across in salt water, I would have to say it would be parrotfish for sure, and that's
Interesting.
something I've been spending a little time trying to crack this last year. But it's not only that they're hard to get to eat a fly, but they're extremely hard to fight. They're hard to keep hooks in as well because of the sort of beak situation that they have.
Yeah.
Um, they're hard to set a hook in. There's a lot of hard things about parrotfish, the country you're chasing them in. There's so much that makes them really, really difficult. And I think that they, for me, at the moment, are really my sort of top tier
Nemesis.
target for
Yeah.
flats.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the parrotfish. They're a coral-based fish, right? They have that beak so they can kind of munch away on, hard things, etc. Are you finding them in, shallow coral, deeper coral? Where are they located typically, and how are you targeting them?
Yeah. So the ones that I'm targeting, I'm trying to target them basically as shallow as possible. As a fly fisherman, I want to be able to make it as visual as possible. I'm stalking them on foot, so I'm trying to look for them in areas where they're in as minimal water as I can possibly find them. And some of the areas where I am fishing them, they're quite literally, and parrotfish will do this. They'll quite literally crawl on their bellies to get up onto a flat, and they want to be up there. And a lot of the time, they'll be the first fish on the flat. They want to be there when it's super shallow.
Okay.
One of the reasons is because at that stage there's still things, crustaceans and crabs and things that they can eat that haven't moved off the flat yet.
Yeah.
So they'll try and work their way up, and they'll quite literally as well move on their belly. Half their back will be out of the water
Yeah. Yeah.
up onto a flat. They're very eager to get up there at that first push of the tide. So that's how I'm trying to target them. I'm trying to make it as visual and as challenging as possible.
So when you have a setup like that, you have something that's kind of bellying up, back out of the water. You can see it's feeding on something, crustacean. How are you casting to it? Are you trying to put it into, a saucer-sized space in front of it? Are you trying to lead it? Are you trying to drag and drop? And, give us some ideas of how you like to cast to them and entice them to eat.
Yeah. So um, they're very spooky fish, extremely spooky fish. So you do have to lead them by a fair amount, but you also have to make the fly visual to them. So it's kind of that really finite line between casting too far or casting too close. Uh, it's a hard one, and also when you're in that such shallow water too, if you're casting even a meter away from, it's probably too close because that little bit of a splash, their eye level a lot of the time is right at the surface of the water. So
Mm,
sometimes I'll cast a little bit further and I'll run longer leaders, 12 plus foot leaders, lighter flies, and I'll just put the fly past them and then bring it back into their vision. Not so much drag and drop, but more working the fly on the bottom.
yeah. And it's a crustacean, so it's a slow work usually kind of thing. And then you get into their visual aspect. Is that the idea?
Yeah, it's another hard one. They're so temperamental, these parrots. They're a really moody fish. They have heaps of personality. So one day, you might do a really slow, long strip, and that's what tickles their fancy. They're going to go straight onto that fly, chase it down, and then the other day they just won't even look at it, or they'll spook from it, and then you'll move to like a little tiny 1 inch twitch, and then that will get their attention, and then they'll
Mm,
find interest in that. So you really have to be prepared to just consistently change it up,
okay.
constantly change what you're doing, change the retrieve, change the flies, and even no matter how much you do that, some days you'll go there and you might find 20 or 30 parrots. You might get shots at 20 fish, and every single one will still refuse it. So with parrots, it's really finding the right fish. Just keep casting at them, keep changing your retrieve, and then eventually one will find interest. And
Hmm.
I mean that's just a tenth of the challenge when they do find interest.
Yeah. So you're, I mean, in relative stance, 3 years you've been fly fishing, you're still relatively new fly fisherman, right? Let me ask you this. A lot of these species that you've been targeting, you had mentioned, yeah, I get refusals. I get 25 shots in a day. I didn't get a single eat. Um, what are you doing mentally to, I think, keep your mettle about you to continue? And then what are you doing to improve? Like, how are you processing that to improve?
Um, to be honest with me, I enjoy the whole entire aspect of fly fishing. I enjoy just being out there and spotting the fish. I'm also into my hunting too, so sighting the fish, stalking it, spotting it is a
Hmm.
big part of the enjoyment for me. Um, I just got to keep on going till I catch it. It's kind of one of those
Yeah,
things. I just think, it's that next cast that I'll get it. Just keep on working at it.
yeah,
And I think that's really what gets you fish at the end of the day. A lot of the fish that I've caught, a lot of the good fish that I've caught, it's been that final moment where I'm thinking, oh, this isn't going to happen. I've traveled all this way, and maybe this fish isn't going to actually, work out. And
yeah,
then I keep on working, keep on going for it, and then eventually, it comes together. So with fly fishing, I think it's very much like that. You just got to keep on working.
yeah,
Yeah, we're
yeah.
making it. Yeah, it's a difficult sport, and we're making it as hard as possible for ourselves too. So, I mean, we don't really get into fly fishing to catch a mass numbers of fish. We're kind of doing it to make things a bit more challenging.
Yeah, that's a great point. It is really a great point. I mean, if we wanted masses as a fish, it would be bait fishing, right? Uh,
100%,
spin
exactly.
rods, it's like make it easy on yourself. Um,
Yeah.
that's really cool. Let me ask you a couple more questions around on that thinking process. Do you keep a log? Do you write things down? Do you prefer maybe talking to your partners or just self-talk, talking through like, okay, next time this is what I'm going to try and do? Just really trying to get to understand the thinking part of your mind and how you're problem solving.
Um, Yeah, I mean, I probably do all of it really. I'm in a shop obviously every day. I've got the fly shop, so I'm talking to people all day, every day. I hear a lot of other people's opinions. I get an opportunity to share my opinions and see what other people have to say about that. So, and that's a big thing about fly fishing too. It's a very much a sport where people are sharing their
Hmm.
experiences and their opinions of what they think works and doesn't work, and I think that's how we all kind of get better at fly fishing too, is from speaking to each other. So. I definitely do spend a lot of time talking to people about what's going on and my theories, but at the same time, I also do a lot of my own research too. Um, I mean, yeah, when I go on a trip, I always like to come back from a trip and then book another, so I have something to look forward to.
Hmm.
Even if
Hmm.
it's in 6 months' time or however long it's going to be until I'm on that trip, and between that time, it gives me a great opportunity to do as much research as I possibly can, talk to some people that have probably done that experience or hopefully have done that experience before, and then I can prepare as much as possible. So, yeah, I mean, I'm whether it's looking at maps or researching flies or whatever it might be to prepare for that species, or figuring out what they eat, what their food source is, the bait that's in the area, all
Hmm.
that sort of stuff is always going to help. The more research you can do about a target species before you go and actually target it, the better you're always going to be.
Yeah, yeah. Do you seek out a lot of people as well that like, hey, this guy's really solid at this. I'm gonna give him a call or shoot him an email, et cetera, and try and pick his brain. Is that also part of your research as well?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I always ask, but if someone's done it, it's always fly fishermen are very eager to share a lot of the time. And you
Hmm.
always do it with respect as well. I'm never
Yeah,
messaging people just to be like, hey, where's your spot? Or
right,
anything like
right.
that. It's one of those things with fly fishing. You always, you share your knowledge, they'll share theirs.
Yep.
Most people are very happy to do that. And if someone has done something I haven't done and I aspire to do what they've done, I mean, you always, you can throw them a message and say, hey, I'm thinking of doing this. Do you have any tips? And
Yeah,
most people are going to be very happy to respond. Fly
yeah,
fishermen, we're a small community. Well, here in Western Australia, we're a small community, so most people are very, very happy to be able to chat about their sport with each other. So,
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, yeah,
I
I
think
always,
the
I always talk to people.
I think the more unique to the more willing a lot of times people get because it's like, oh wow, this guy's really getting after it. Like, how did he figure this out? Was even a target,
Yeah,
right? So it's really
yep,
cool, very cool. So
yeah, definitely.
I'm not familiar with the geography of Australia all that well. So how far up are we now in the north? Because we want to cover a little bit, that we as much as we can in the north, and then we want to drop down south for a little bit too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, so that stage when you're starting to get to like Dampier Archipelago, you're about a 16-hour drive from Perth, or a 2-hour flight. From there, then you go up, you start getting into, it's about another 6 to 7 hours from there, and you start getting into what we call the Kimberley. So the
Mm-hmm.
Kimberley is our northwest Australian fishing. So we get barramundi through there, very similar to your snook.
Yep.
We get tarpon, but we have Indo-Pacific tarpons. They're a much smaller species than what you guys get, unfortunately. And then we have a multitude again of similar species to what you get through Dampier Archipelago and Exmouth Gulf and that too. You get your perm and your bastards, your tuskies, all that sort of stuff. Pelagics too, GTs. The diversity up there is just incredible. We have a lot of freshwater fishing there too. So we have Saratoga, similar to an arowana or a miniature arapaima sort of looking thing.
Okay.
And then we have, I mean, the list goes on, mangrove jacks, all kinds of different species that we can chase.
Very cool. Very cool. And so let's do this. Let's stop there for the north. Let's start to head south. Is it more and more um, saltwater fishing as you head south? Is there more freshwater? What's the play in the south for you?
So like in the southwest, we do have, that's kind of where our trout are. It gets colder as you go south, so we have like our trout fishing, we have redfin perch, and a couple other little species, a few invasives around, different things, some carp and that in our southwest in terms of freshwater. And then you go to the ocean, and we have blue groper, amberjacks, we have Samson fish, we have yellowtail kings. There's a whole
Mm-hmm.
array of different fishing. It's colder water though, so there's less fish, there's less bait, they're harder to find, and the country is more gnarly too. Not so much flats fishing, but a lot of it is more rock, big
Mm,
swells, white water. So
okay.
it becomes a little bit more of a challenge.
Yeah, and in southern Australia, just kind of grazing the map here, there seems to be a lot of still water down there. Are there still water opportunities that you fish as well?
There's definitely still water opportunities for trout. There's still water opportunities for species like black brim as well. It's not, as I said, like a lot of our still water stuff that we have here and a lot of our trout fishing stuff, it's stocked fish.
Okay.
Um, so it's not real high grade trout fishing. We do have some decent stuff here, and we do have a few little systems where the trout do reproduce, but by large, it's mainly stocked fish.
Okay. All right, cool. Um, let's see this. I want to switch a little bit because we mentioned the travel, right?
Hmm.
One of the places that you've traveled to quite a few times, it sounds like, is New Zealand. And I was looking through your page and saw a massive rainbow trout. It looks darn near prehistoric. It's so big
Yeah.
and old looking in the face. I mean, it's definitely a grandpa of some sort. Tell us a little bit about that trip and that particular story. If you could repeat that, I think everybody would really enjoy it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, I mean, I've actually only done New Zealand the one time, so
Oh, okay.
that was the first fishing trip there, first trip there. So that fish kind of came about because I'd done a bit of research into a locality. This specific locality, you actually had to get a ballot, a winner ballot, to be able to fish it. So I entered the ballot. I actually had some airfare credit as well from before COVID,
Mm.
and I had to use it or it was going to elapse. And I put this ballot in, and I didn't really have heaps of high hopes for it as well because there was only so many people that get to fish it every year. It's a minimal number, and there's quite a few people that enter into it. And the whole reason they have the ballot is to try and protect these fish because they're unusually large. They're spawning around that time, so they don't want people to flood there and catch them all.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, they're moving out of these massive lake systems and they're moving up into these tributaries to spawn. Um, so yeah, they try and do it so there's minimal impact on the fish, and it's really great. New Zealand has a great fishery system like that too, so they're very very cautious and conscious about their fishery. So I put this ballot in. I ended up pulling the ballot and winning it, and I had nominated my partner as well to be a teammate on the ballot, so she got to come too. So we booked the flights. We flew over there. You could, for the ballot, you either win a 2 or a 3 day ballot. So if you win it on the weekend, from memory, you get the 3 days. If you win it on a weekday, you get the 2 days on the ballot. We got there, we drove down to the area, and a day before the ballot, we walked about 12 kilometers of the river one direction and 12 kilometers back to our vehicle. We saw not a fish, nothing. I was just trying to find some fish to see if I could find any good spots or riffles or anything that would hold a good fish and that we would be able to go back to the next day when the ballot opened and hopefully, start off on a head start.
So you're
Didn't see a
permitted to
fish.
scout. You're allowed to scout the water at any time. Then
Oh
is
yeah,
that
it's public land. You can walk the edges. You just can't fish it without the ballot.
okay?
So yeah, obviously fishing without a rod. We just took binoculars. We're in half of it's a big, huge gorge system. So a lot of the time we were quite above the water.
Yeah.
And then just polarized glasses, some binoculars, and went for a hike. And we walked it the first day. Didn't see a single fish. We were obviously quite disheartened, and at this stage we thought, maybe we probably missed our opportunity. We had a little bit of a late ballot as well on the spawn, so we thought maybe the fish had moved into the tributaries and already moved back out into the lake systems. And we thought would persist. So the next day we got up, we woke up really early, started walking again. We did a full day, another whole entire day. We didn't see a fish. We fished a whole bunch of water, deeper pools and that as well. We just ended up drifting some check nymphing through some bigger pools and trying a few different methods. And again, absolutely nothing, not a hit, not even a little fish, nothing. And we thought, maybe this isn't going to happen. We'll give it another day and we'll see. So then the second day of our ballot, the third day walking the river, again, nothing to report back. Whole day was just not a fish, nothing. And then we got all the way down to sort of the lower stretches of the system. And I thought, I had a little drone in the car, and I'd bought it. I probably had the drone for, I don't know, a year or something. I've never used this thing. I bought it, in a GoPro, and I thought I'll film some of my trips, and you never do, like when you're fishing the whole time.
Exactly. You're always fishing, right?
Yeah, and exactly. And anyways, I put this drone up, and I flew it over, and there was a big wide riffle system, and it would have been, I reckon, 100, 120 meters across, and sort of on the second, like 2/3 of the system, there was just two big trout just sitting on these two riffles. And I thought, oh my God, like finally I found something. I'll go over there, and the light was getting low, and I went over there, I stalked up to them, and I put dozens of casts over these two fish, and just no interest. Change flies, and eventually one of them just turned the front fish, swam straight into the second fish, and they both just turned and went straight downstream. So I thought, that's like shot blowing.
Yeah.
That was probably my opportunity. And then we went, this time it was almost dark by the time I got back to the car. We went to sleep, and we woke up the next morning, and I went back out to those riffles and I had a look, and I didn't see anything. The fish weren't back there, and I thought, it's kind of, is it worth doing another massive hike? We're a couple days into it. We're absolutely, by this stage, just ruined and exhausted.
Mentally and physically, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yep. Yeah, I mean, we'd traveled there this was the main target we'd traveled there for. And by this stage, you kind of think, this isn't happening. We've wasted a few days probably on this system. And anyways, we persisted, and it got later in the day. And towards the end of the day, this is our last day of the ballot, so we could fish till sunset. Then it's done. That's the ballot over. Can't go back. And I thought, this is it. I'm done. Can't do this anymore. I've give up. I was broken. And I actually started walking back to the car. My partner was on the shore, and she was getting her waders off, getting her boots off. She was going back up to the car, and I just walked past this one little depression. There was sort of really shallow riffle, and it went into this little depression. It was probably 2 foot deep, and I just saw one fish, just a solitary fish, just sitting in the depression. And I decided I'll have a shot. We'll see what happens. And I stood there and I cast, I don't know how many times I changed my fly, but I was changing a cast or two casts, putting it over this fish, changing flies,
Yeah.
and the fish just wouldn't react. It just sat there, head upstream. I stayed out of sight. It didn't notice me, and I thought I'll just keep on casting at it and just see, something might happen. And in the end, I went down. I had 6 pound tippet on. I went down to this little like size 14. It was a Simon's Ugly little stonefly nymph, and
Hmm.
they sort of have those rubbery legs on them, and they're a great little pattern for rainbows. And I put one on, just a full black one, no flash, no color or anything in it, just a little black one. I think it had white legs, and I just roll casted it upstream. I was sort of check nymphing it, had no indicator or anything, and
Hmm.
I cast upstream over its head, and I saw the fly, and the fly was just absolutely perfect going towards its nose, and I just saw the white of its mouth open and close. Hit it, and this thing just didn't move. It just sat on the bottom. I
Like
had
a
6 pound
log.
on. I was on a 6 weight, yeah, and
Yeah.
and I
So
thought,
just for our US guys, 6 pound, that's like 4X tippet.
yeah,
Um,
4x.
yeah, I mean it's pretty light tippet for a big fish. And now, I mean, I'm saying big fish because I've seen the pictures, but how many centimeters was that fish, roughly, do you think?
It was bang on 100 centimeters.
Okay, so 100 centimeters that's almost 40 inches.
Yeah,
That's like 39 inches. Huh. A
yeah, big
39-inch
fish.
rainbow. I mean, that fish was massive.
It
Um,
was huge, yeah. It was, and even just not so much the length, but the girth of it as well. It was a big fish, had
right.
heaps of mass to it. So like exactly when I hit it, it kind of just didn't really do anything. I had to give it a few sort of tugs to try and move this thing, and then it just started shaking and just going side to side. Came up off the bottom, and it actually went to go turn downstream. And I thought if it goes downstream, there's nothing I can do. I'm on a 6 weight. I've got 6 pound. This is like every part of a 25 pound fish.
Right, right.
And I just started sprinting downstream to keep in front of it and try and coerce it to the bank. And I just stayed beneath it, trying to get it to either turn back upstream or just not allow it to get underneath me and just start pulling line.
Yeah.
And the fight went on for a while, and it was pretty precarious. You're walking on boulders there, and they've got algae all over them.
Oh, yeah.
So it's slippery, and a few trips later, holding the rod up as high as I can, I ended up managing to coerce it into the shallow pool and land it. Yeah, which is quite
Yeah.
incredible. And as I landed it, my partner's still putting her waders and her boots on, trying to get back over to me. She's quite a bit up the bank. Yeah, so I thought I've just got to net this myself. And as I netted the fish, I had the rod up over my shoulder. I was netting the fish. Because I had a big long tippet on it as well. Just
Yeah,
these
yeah.
fish in ultra clear water, they're very spooky, so long tippets. And as I netted the fish, the fly just popped out of its mouth as it was going into the net. So it was just like
Dear
a
Lord.
very lucky situation. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, good for you for staying persistent, man. Guys, if you haven't seen this thing, honestly, go to Angus's page. It's Angus_line, and just scroll down a little bit. When you see this rainbow, your jaw's gonna drop. I mean, I was saying to you, I went up to the Katmai Trophy Lodge and fished with some friends of mine here in Alaska, and we get, there's big trout up there, and I caught a last day 32 by 19 rainbow, and when I saw your fish, it dwarfed mine. And I just was like, I can't believe that. That thing doesn't even look real. It's so old looking and
Yeah. Amazing.
prehistoric. Yeah, amazing fish. So congrats to you
Yeah.
on that, Angus. Let's do
Yeah.
this. We're
Cheers, man.
we're we're closing up on time. So I want to talk about you own a gear shop. You probably have tons of
Hmm.
people come in to you, talk about gear, et cetera. And what are some of the tips that you have around like, hey, these are the types of questions maybe you should be asking and what you should be thinking about when you're talking gear with a shop.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, um, it's when you come into a shop, you're coming to a fly shop, you're talking to a fly fisherman. So like generally if someone comes in and they want to talk to me about fly fishing, I'm stoked already because it's my hobby. So
Yeah.
um yeah, I mean approach everybody. You're coming into a store, approach them with a smile and be direct with what you want is always a good idea as well. I always like to think that if I go into a shop, if I'm looking to purchase something, I'll kind of do a little bit of research before, outline a budget for myself. And it kind of just helps me as well or any other shop owner just figure out and kind of narrow down exactly what you're looking for. It
Hmm.
makes it easy because as we know, fly fishing is a very gear orientated sport. There's a million different rods, a million different lines, different reels. So yeah, the easier you can sort of make that, the smoother it will always go. You'll walk out with something that you were, kind of had in your mind that you were thinking of, or you'll
Mm-hmm.
work out with something that's probably a little bit more dedicated to yourself because you're talking to someone that has that knowledge of what you might need for the situation you're going to be fishing for. So yeah, always be open to listen. Generally, the guy in the shop is, for the most part, and I hope most people's shops are like this, the guy in the shop should have some pretty good knowledge about, what you're trying to do and what you're fishing for and the setup that's going to be best for you. So be open-minded, have a bit of a listen. If they have some things to, pointers or ideas, take them on board, have a think. Yeah, I mean, that's probably the best way to approach it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's kind of key, and I'm curious to hear your perspective, is I think a lot of times as anglers, you might get bashful, right? Go in and you're talking to shop owner, a guy seems like he's really experienced, and there's really no shame in being inexperienced, right? It's like, where are you trying to get? That's, you want to talk to the expert
Yep.
and feed off of that. So you kind of
Yeah,
feel the
for sure.
same. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely, and that's the thing. If you're going into a shop and you really don't know, you're trying to learn, just explain it. Be open about it. Just say, hey, I'm trying to explore, this avenue. I don't know much about it. What are your thoughts? And it
Mm-hmm.
makes it so much easier rather than, um, if you kind of go in there and you're pretending you know what's going on, and it kind of staggers that learning curve. And
Yeah.
fly fishing, there's a lot to learn, so I mean, there's so many different lines for different scenarios. There's different rods and rod lengths, and all different
Yeah.
things, reels. There's
Tippet
so much to
materials. I
learn.
mean, you can just go down the line, right? It's
Yeah,
crazy.
that's it, and that's just the fly rod setup, and then beyond that, there's all the tying materials.
Yeah.
Um, there's just a multitude of different things. It is a really gear orientated sport, so definitely be ready to learn, be a sponge and just soak up whatever that person is saying. And if it's sort of, you can kind of, be the judge of if you think it's for you or not for you, what they're suggesting. But the best way to figure out what's best for you is just to explain what you're trying to do,
Yeah. Yeah.
lay it out, and then we can sort of make a more informed judgment, hopefully, on what's going to be best for the scenario that you want to experience.
Yeah. I think the other thing that's really key too, and I've found for me at least, is take a notebook. And
Yeah.
I'm not shy about slowing people down. Like, hey, wait, what did you say there? Let me write this down, because when I first started, I was a little bit that way. It was a little bit like, oh, I'll just show up and ask them some questions, and then next thing you know, you thought one question really turns out to be 20 questions, right, and
Yeah.
answers, and you can't remember them all. So coming in with a notebook, and I start to go, okay, this, oh, don't forget this, and just jotting my ideas down and thoughts, and then trying to review it, maybe go back, do some internet research, maybe come back to the shop a couple times. I mean, that's what you guys are there for, right? Um,
Yeah.
I worked in retail for a little bit in the outdoor industry, and that's what I always remembered is like, hey, just go ask someone. Like, that's what they're there for. They get paid. They don't want to
That's
stand
it.
around and look at boots or skis or fly rods. They want to talk to people. So very
Yeah,
cool.
that's it. And that's the other thing too. Like, you got to remember the whole reason we have these retail stores like this is so that people can come in and get the information that they need, make a more informed decision, get the customer service, get the repair service, all that good stuff. So, I mean, if we weren't there, you would be relying on just going online, doing your own research, and
Hmm.
then purchasing something online that might not be exactly the perfect fit for you. So, definitely take advantage of these stores, especially fly shops. Like, um, there's a lot going on in a fly shop. There's a million things that you've got to learn and remember, and you come to us for knowledge, and we're always going to be more than happy to share it with you. And that's the whole
Hmm.
idea. We are trading our knowledge in the hopes that you'll spend money at our little business. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the main objective there.
Yeah. And there's all kinds of other learning activities too. So, I mean, hanging out in the shop, talking to the guys when they're in their shop, or I'm going to swing by at this time of the day because I know all the guys are coming back from guiding for the day, and I might be able to sit in on the conversation and learn a few things. Or I'm going
Yeah.
to show up to fly tie night, and I'm going to tie flies with someone, and yeah, I'm going to tie some bonefish flies, but I don't have any experience in that, but I'm going to start to learn and figure out
Yeah.
things. And in that conversation, you're going to go from not knowing anything on bonefish to being actually relatively competent from a mental standpoint on bonefish, usually in one conversation. And then it's like, maybe I try this. And then you go out and have an outing, and it's like, you learn more to realize the more you know, the more you don't know. But yeah, you go have the conversation again and again, and
Yeah.
it's just a great atmosphere for learning. So very cool.
Yeah,
Thanks for
that's it,
sharing.
exactly. And that's the thing. If you're in an area like this, and you are like talking about your interest, you're talking about, say, a fly, for example, you're going to learn little things, like even the buoyancy of certain materials, the hydrodynamics of the way this fly is tied, or that, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and the reason why we fish this way, to the reason why we fish like no UV or UV in this situation. There's so many different little things that are going on in fly fishing that you've just got to be a pair of ears a lot of the time, just soaking
Mm-hmm.
in, and that's the best way to move forward.
Yeah, very cool. Let's do this. Let's wrap up the show. I want you to give
Yeah,
me, you travel a fair amount, and it's road travel, it's flight travel, et cetera. If you can give me kind of what you would consider, these are my top three concerns and tips for travel.
yeah, for sure. I would say a really big one is the ergonomics of your traveling setup. So making sure that everything is as compact, as easy to get to, but safe as possible. So really good traveling setup, a good luggage bag, good rod storage. So something like a Sims rod vault, or
Mm-hmm.
the fish pond rod vault. So something like that is worth its weight in gold. It makes things easier, more lightweight. You can travel easily with that sort of stuff, and your gear's safe. So definitely ergonomics of your traveling gear is a big thing to think about. Another big thing to think about is, generally when we're traveling, we're going to be traveling to a destination a lot of the time that we don't have a lot of experience in. So don't be afraid to talk to people that are from that area or fish there. It's a
Mm-hmm.
big thing. A big part of it is to try and do as much research as you can before you get to these areas. That
Mm-hmm.
is always, not always that easy too, especially with some of the more remote destinations, like some of the stuff that I've sort of been fishing the last year. I've been to some places where 5 or 6 people have ever fished or caught that fish before, so
Yeah.
it
Okay.
makes it not easy, but uh, definitely any little bit of knowledge or tips makes it easier. I don't like to land on the ground and then have to figure things out. I kind of want to know what to tie and what to expect before I get there. It gives you a massive head start. And probably the third thing is, I'd say, a lot of the time these days with social media and that, it's quite easy to figure out if the outfitter that you've chosen or the destination you've chosen is safe or legitimate. But definitely do research in that regard too. Make sure the area that you're going is safe. Make sure that you are well versed on the local customs as well. You're not
Mm.
offending anybody or putting yourself in a dangerous situation.
Yep.
And make sure that you've got a legitimate guide or service if you are going with one too, because nobody likes getting ripped off. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Well, you gave us some great tips, and told us a lot about Australia. It's really cool to hear all of that. Different aspects of the West Coast, up and down, and how you get to utilize it. Sounds like just an ideal location for someone who's, really into fly fishing and wants to experience a lot of salt water and a little bit of
Yeah.
fresh water, et cetera, man. Really cool. And also appreciate the tips, and of course that rainbow story, man. That sticks in my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a prize fish, man. I'm really happy for you that you were able to get that. It was great having you on the show. And again, I'm going to get you back on the show because we're going to talk about another trip that you're getting ready to head out on. So give us a little bit of teaser on that, where you're headed, and we'll get back to everyone on that.
Yeah, for sure. So one of our hosted trips that we have is to the Cocos Islands, the Cocos Keeling Islands. Pardon me. It's a little. It's 27 little islands on the atoll. Yeah, 27 at the top of my head. It's closer to Indonesia than it is to Australia, but it is owned by Western Australia. It's part of our
Mm,
territory.
mm-hmm.
So It's an incredible area. There's massive bonefish there. The numbers of bonefish are just world class. You can have a tide change where you catch 20, 30 plus bonefish. It's quite amazing. You will see them as well, double figure bones too. So big fish. We get parrotfish there. We get GTs. We get red bass, billfish. Just so many different species that you can chase there. You can really just, you could spend a lifetime there and try and figure the place out. There's so many little things going on and a multitude of flats and really cool area. But yeah, we have a hosted trip there next week, and then we have one the following month. So yeah, hopefully we can talk about that a bit.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm looking forward to hearing some stories and getting to know a little bit more about that, Angus. So thanks again for being on the show. If you want to get a hold of Angus, again, the channel that he's on Instagram is fly_fishing_outfitters, and that's flyfishingoutfitters.com.au. Angus, thanks again, and everyone, we'll see you next week.